Hello, John. It's such an honor to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert Interview.
Thanks for having me on. It's a blast.
For those of you who are not already familiar with John Durant, he is the author of the Paleo Manifesto and a speaker at PrimalCon, Paleo FX, and Google Talks. He was featured on The Colbert Show as the Urban Caveman and in many other publications and interviews. So, John, what was the catalyst that brought you into the paleo spotlight?
Well, aside from looking like a caveman, which actually helped, the real catalyst was in college. I studied a little bit of evolutionary psychology, and not in relation to health and fitness, but into how the mind came to be, and looked at sort of our ancestral past in Africa and then beyond. And I got to work with a professor named Steve Pinker. He was my undergraduate thesis advisor, and he's written some best-selling books on evolution and human nature. And so for me, that was very eye-opening to say this perspective is very powerful, can explain a lot, but it wasn't concrete in my life. It was all very sort of theoretical. It was a bunch of ideas, very interesting ideas, but it wasn't very concrete yet. Graduated from college, moved to New York City, take my first full-time desk job, and I just wasn't happy with my health. And it wasn't weight for me. It wasn't weight that got me into paleo. I had put on 20, 25 pounds that I didn't need, but frankly, guys don't get judged on that as much, and so it wasn't as big of a deal. For me, it was all energy level and mood. I was spiking and crashing all day, every day, needed 3 or 4 cups of coffee to get through the day. Head would be on the desk after lunch. And, it's not just energy level, it's mood. So when I had high energy, I was optimistic and confident. And when I was low energy, I was pessimistic and, unsure. My brother actually sent me, he knew I was trying to get healthier, he sent me an essay by Art Devaney. Art was an early figure, a very influential early figure in the paleo movement, as it was online. He was one of the early bloggers, helped influence Mark Sisson to start Mark's Daily Apple. He influenced me. And he had an essay called Evolutionary Fitness, basically at a high level arguing we should look at what humans did in the wild as a starting point to think about what we're adapted for and what's healthy. Not to say that life in the wild is easy or that health is perfect in the wild. It's definitely not. But when there's all this madness about what people should eat or how they should live today and all these conflicting recommendations, it's a very useful tool, a very useful heuristic to think about guidelines for what is a healthy lifestyle. So I gave it a try. I started a little blog because people in my family and some friends wanted to, what do you eat every day? What does that mean? And it was a terrible blog. It was ugly and boring. But you have to start somewhere, right? And I got very good results, and I got some unexpected results. Yeah, I lost some weight. My energy evened out and was generally higher. But my complexion also improved, and that was unexpected. I was in my early 20s and still occasionally had bad complexion. And, I thought, isn't this supposed to go away after puberty, after adolescence? I'm an adult now, and I'm still breaking out. So something seemed off there. And then I went an entire winter without sick. And again, my sort of notion of what was normal was really challenged there because I thought winter meant, 2 colds and the flu. And that's what happened to everybody, and there was no way to avoid it. And suddenly I realized, man, maybe my immune system has been sort of mildly compromised for much of my life. So, that's really when I started it. And then the sort of the quick story is I started a paleo meetup group in New York, and that got picked up by the press, and that led to the appearance on Colbert, and those led to a book deal, and quit my job, wrote the book, and my book, The Paleo Manifesto, came out 2 years ago.
Nice. That's really a great story. Here on the farm, when we go to feed the animals, like the sheep, it's like I don't feed them cupcakes. That doesn't fit into what's healthy for them. And I often wonder why we do that to our children. As humans, it's like, we know that cupcakes are not healthy for them.
The animal perspective is really powerful. It's really powerful because if you start with humans, everybody has a different opinion about what's healthy. And so much of it is tied into our identity, into our religion, and it's really hard to put that to the side. But, there's this really fun chapter in my book about, I take a field trip to the Cleveland Zoo and get to learn about two western lowland gorillas that unfortunately are overweight and have heart disease. And the zookeepers basically are thinking, okay, well, how can we get these gorillas healthy? Cardiovascular disease is the number one cause of mortality of male gorillas. Same thing with male humans in civilization. So guess what? They looked at their diet and realized they were feeding these gorillas what are called gorilla biscuits. Now, wild gorillas, they know this. Wild gorillas don't actually eat these fiber bars from hell. I've actually tried one. They're very bland. So they switched their diet to a biscuit-free diet, and miracle of miracles, all these health problems go away or recede. When you start, this was a little bit of a magic trick on my end. I wanted a starting point where I could bring people together and get them to agree on the approach, and then I get into the human stuff. And before people realize it, they've already bought into the approach.
Your book is unique in that its focus is to explore lifestyle choices that fit into a greater evolutionary perspective. So how does religion fit into the book?
There's a chapter in my book called Moses the Microbiologist, and it's actually my favorite chapter in the book. It's chapter 4. And just to give you some context, the first part of the book is historical. I walk people through 5 ages of human existence, what I call the animal age, the Paleolithic age, the agricultural age, industrial age, and information age. And I just tell fun stories about emblematic stories of that part of our existence and sort of what we can learn about human health from it. When we get to the agricultural revolution, people start growing crops, they start herding domesticated animals, we start living in cities in much larger amounts, and infectious disease explodes. And so in that era, yes, diet took a turn for the worse, but really what was the greatest health challenge of that era was disease. And the funny thing about germs is that they're usually invisible and they can spread, all these different ways. And so it's really hard to understand what's causing all these people to die. So this chapter is really about people came to grips and how they started to deal with disease in an era before a scientific understanding of the germ theory of disease. And one of the big ways that people dealt with disease was religious traditions. And I spend a lot of time focusing on Judaism, but also talk about Zoroastrianism, Islam, Christianity, and a few Eastern traditions. But it's really incredible. If you go back and read the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, it is remarkable how obsessed these people were with hygiene and how concerned they were with disease. After Genesis, much, a good part of Exodus and then Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers are really concerned with disease and different rituals that appear to, in many circumstances, to address disease. So let's take a seminal example, hand washing. So hand washing is mentioned 3 times in the first 5 books, and Jewish priests and Jewish people are instructed to wash their hands in certain circumstances, like after touching a corpse, And it was subsequently interpreted that Jewish folks should wash their hands in the morning after waking up, before they eat, after going to the bathroom, after having sex, after touching a corpse or being close to a graveyard, or all sorts of different circumstances that today seems obvious. Of course you should do that. And I think we really take that knowledge for granted. It was really a Nobel-worthy insight for people to take, two parts of their body, their hands, and run them underwater. But it was this adaptive. It was, disease can spread so quickly that culture sometimes is the only thing that's fast enough to change right along with it. So I talk about not just hand washing, but bathing, dietary codes, and a lot of times people will focus on pork and shellfish because that's what folks are most familiar with, the prohibitions that folks are most familiar with. But if you step back from the prohibitions and just sort of look at the broad strokes, first of all, you don't eat any animals that have died of their own accord. And ranchers and farmers know that if an animal drops dead in a field, there's a good chance that and even if it's not, it can sort of quickly become inedible. So you stay away from that. You stay away from vermin and rodents and vermin. Well, rats and things are notorious carrier disease. And you also don't eat animals that are top tier predators. So things like lions or bears or vultures. And the funny thing about those animals is that they devour, a lot of carnivores or sometimes omnivores are willing to devour carriers of disease. So rodents and carcasses and dead bodies and things like that. So there appears to be this really incredible latent implicit germ theory of disease that is in a lot of these religious traditions. Imagine this. So imagine you lived 4,000, 3,000 years ago, and you don't understand the germ theory of disease works. And sometimes people just get sick, and 3 days later they fall over and they die. When they're 25, or when they're 4. And so to a person back then, if you really put yourself in their shoes, they attribute these deaths to the gods or God. Say, this person was struck down by God for doing something wrong, for doing something sinful. So, essentially a scientifically sound, more or less, not perfect, but effective, scientifically effective hygiene code. And you get almost everybody in the community to do it, there will be a lower incidence of disease, a lower burden of disease. And it will look like that group of people is favored by God. It may look like you're the chosen ones because you live longer and, plagues and pestilences that affect other people don't affect you so much. And if sinning is then defined as something that is an unhygienic behavior, and people then, Jewish people who follow these laws were then to sin, well, guess what? If it increases your chance of getting infected and dying, it also increases your chance of doing something that looks like it is down by God. So you could have established this new hygienic equilibrium, and then the Jewish God has always been known for being this sort of abstract, rule-bound, almost a scientific God in some respect, and being a one true God in sort of the way that sort of scientific laws can are sort of unified and sort of grounded in sort of a unified view of the world. And so I argue in this chapter that it was really just disease and hygiene that enabled the emergence of these hygiene laws and these purity codes. Long story short, you should go read the chapter because more than I can detail on one podcast. But the funny response is that both believers and non-believers have really enjoyed the chapter, because non-believers will read it and say, see, I told you there's a scientific explanation for religion. And believers will read it and say, see, I told you religion is grounded in science. So it's been really fascinating to watch the response, and it's definitely the chapter in the book that is really most distinct from the other paleo books. And I know there are a lot of paleo books on the market now, but it's this and some other parts that folks won't be disappointed if they're afraid of sort of reading the same old, same old.
That's cool. The religion part, I had never thought of that, and it's really neat to bring that into this perspective because it is a part of our evolution. So you use the term biohacking in your Google Talks. How would you recommend someone new to this lifestyle begin biohacking their life?
It's basically running little experiments on yourself. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't necessarily need to go buy expensive tracking gadgets. You can just use a piece of paper and a pencil and just be consistent in recording something about yourself. It could be, removing a set of foods from your diet for a period of time. But then you know what? Maybe you come from European ancestry, and there's been a lot of dairy in your culture for a long time, and you think, okay, maybe I want to see how my body does on cheese or this particular type, full-fat fermented dairy. Okay, well then add it back in and track how you feel and track a few measures. Is your complexion still good? And so there are a lot of different ways that you can structure these little experiments that doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be expensive, and it's really empowering, as an amateur, as a layman.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I did that recently with potatoes. Potatoes, I don't do well with nightshade, and I hadn't eaten them for a long time. And then we were on a trip, and I ate them for like 5 days in a row, and arthritis set into my elbows for almost 3 weeks. Even after I cleared the potatoes out of my system, it took 3 weeks to get everything kind of re-regulated. So, yeah, just tracking that is really important. Yeah, so I'm not going to eat potatoes.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to do it. And if you change one thing at a time, and you sort of try to keep everything else the same, it's much easier to track.
Yeah, that's good. I think people should do that. So could you tell me more about founding Wild Ventures?
It's a group of us that do some angel investing. I've started to advise some health and wellness companies to help them raise money, get promotion, and build a team, get media, get distribution. And it started a little bit by accident. I didn't really set out to start it, but living in New York and having a little bit of a platform in the paleo space, some different companies would sometimes reach out to me, and a lot of them I wasn't aligned with their values or their product or what have you. I was approached by these two young men who eventually started EXO, which is the cricket flour protein bar. And I was writing a little bit about insect protein in my book, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. They seem like hardworking, talented guys. And so I helped them raise a little bit of money and get some promotion. And I looked around at a few friends, and I was like, oh, we could do more of this. See, the typical people, the big boys in venture capital are the actual venture capital funds that will write big checks to startup companies that want to grow big and fast. By the way, venture capital isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. I mean, really, the entrepreneurs that are often revered the most are people who just bootstrap their business, don't take outside capital, continue to own the company, and do it themselves. I mean, that's a great way to do it, and not all companies want to grow so quickly in a risky way or need to. So But but here's the problem with venture capitalists is a lot of them, they don't really, in many cases, sort of live and breathe health and wellness. A lot of sort of Wall Street types and things like that. And they don't always have the pulse of sort of where the world is headed and what true believers believe in. So, so Wild Ventures, our goal is to find founders and entrepreneurs that are building the world we want to see. See, because here's the thing is that there's a place for criticism, but there's a massive role for building the future that you want to see. Criticize by creating. And we need entrepreneurs going out there that say, that get away from the keyboard sometimes and instead of just sort of bemoaning the state of agriculture or, complaining about the dietary guidelines, goes out there and builds something better, and give people an alternative to embrace. And the reality is we do live in a commercial society, and, it's so funny. So I've been involved in some of the barefoot running world, and, you don't need to buy anything to go barefoot running. You have feet, right?
Yeah.
But we're all born with them, and you don't need to go spend $150 on barefoot sneakers. But guess what? Barefoot running didn't take off until there was a product that people could buy. And so it's it's just sort of how some people think, and so there's a little dance that you play where on the one hand you say, well, you don't actually need a lot of this stuff, but on the other hand you want to get mainstream folks to give them an accessible, approachable alternative, and so that's what we've been doing with Wild Ventures. So I advise 8 companies now, and they're sort of all over the map in the different types of companies. We've got Exo, the cricket flour protein bars. There's a company called Thrive Market, which is doing very well right now. Sort of Costco meets Whole Foods online. So it's about a $60 annual membership. Oh, you are? Yep. Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's cool.
How do you like it?
I do. Yeah. They have
Good.
Great emails, and yeah, they feel real personable, which I really like. It doesn't feel big and boxy. Yeah.
And
yeah,
they've been really focused on maintaining that mission. The founders are just a really terrific group. They're not only well intentioned, but they're very talented. And it's not easy to build basically an online version of Costco with 4,000 different products and hundreds of different brands and to do that also quickly. And they really have they've really shot into the scene, and they really have some very cool initiatives planned for the future, as part of the food movement. And I mean, the way that I think about it now is I get my pantry staples from Thrive, and then I'll shop at a local farmer's market for my fresh produce, or a grocery store for my fresh produce. They don't do fresh produce. They sort of leave that to others. So it's I save money on the pantry items, and then I spend a little bit more on the fresh stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm helping them, and I'm helping I'm helping a skin microbiome company, which is really cool. They're called AOBiome. They have a product called Mother Dirt. If you go to motherdirt.com, a lot of people in the paleo movement are familiar with the gut microbiome and the importance of gut health and how our gut is part of our immune system, and dysregulation of the gut can cause autoimmune problems and, influences our mood and things like that. Well, guess what? The same is true of the skin. The gut and the skin are our 2 largest sources of contact with the outside world. And the microbiome on the skin also plays a really important role in our immune system, and we've totally destroyed and disrupted it with soaps and shampoos and lotions and potions and skincare products, and we had no idea we were doing that to our skin. Now, yes, those products can help kill some bad germs, but it's like using antibiotics. Like, okay, there's some circumstances where it can be appropriate to use them, but most people just use them when somebody has a sniffle. And we've only come to appreciate the drawbacks that even appropriate antibiotic usage has. So this company, they actually have a live good bacteria in a bottle. It's a spray to help replenish your skin microbiome. It's really incredible. So I'm spending a few weeks back in Detroit, where I grew up and where my parents are, and I just put a few bottles of this into the fridge, and my poor mother has to put up with all the funny things that I do, whether it's the cricket bars or the bacteria in a bottle. I go, don't worry, Mom, you're going to be doing this one day.
I could just see that scene unfolding. That's hilarious.
Oh, I know. She has her hands full with me, but secretly she likes it.
I love the concept of Wild Ventures to help drive the businesses that are making the world a better place. And that's what we do here on our sustainable farms. We drive the systems that benefit everybody. Yeah,
and I mean, you're doing it. You're living it. You live it every day. I actually sometimes feel a little guilty because I'll write about sustainable farming or being close to the land or even hunting from a Manhattan apartment. And I did go on a hunting adventure in Michigan and shot my first deer and field dressed it and butchered it and cooked it and all that. But even so, this is part of the reason why I've actually recently left New York, is I feel really out of touch, and I have a lot of admiration for you and the work that you're doing in Colorado.
Well, you'll have to come visit.
Oh, careful.
Pull the carrots we go hunt the elk.
Oh, do you go elk hunting?
Yeah. The guys get them in the mountain. It's in our backyard. Pretty awesome.
Oh, that's amazing.
So what is your vision for the future of your work?
I've been pretty nimble and haven't gotten tied down sort of working for any one company or corporation. I'm actually working on, I'm just wrapping up another book that I'm doing with Spartan Race, the obstacle racing company. The founder is this amazing guy named Joe DeSena. If you haven't listened to a podcast with him, go look one up on the internet. Tim Ferriss has one with him, and then he has his own podcast. But he's just this incredible guy who lives in Vermont, and Italian-American guy from Queens, very much of that style. And he's just this hardcore endurance athlete who lives and breathes it. He is a true believer. And so I've been helping him on his second book. It's called Spartan Fit. It'll be coming out next year. And that's been really fun. I really like digging into some of, as you can tell from my book, I like digging into some of the history and telling it in a way that's actually fun and entertaining that most people can get into. And so, the history of ancient Greece and Sparta and the Olympics, it's so rich with sort of sport and the athletic tradition, and not just for men but for women as well. So that will be coming out, and that's been a project that I'm working on. And then, I'm spending a lot of time with Wild Ventures and building that up. Not to get into sort of obscure things, but the beautiful. I've started an AngelList Syndicate, which is an angel investing platform, which will allow other people to invest in these types of companies that we support right alongside us. So I'm working on that. And sort of the beauty of that is in venture capital, you typically have to go out and raise an ungodly amount of money, which takes a long time, and many people aren't actually able to do it. And yet with one of these new angel investing platforms, it actually, it allows more people to participate. So I'm doing that.
That's great.
And yeah, I'm trying to be nimble, and I'm trying to, really focus on projects that work. And it's a little hard to see as an entrepreneur. It can be a little hard to see a couple of years in the distance. I mean, I don't have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. I'm improvising. This is jazz music, Lynn. This is jazz music. So
that's great.
You got to sort of figure it out as you go.
So how do you combat the common paleo cartoon caveman misconceptions?
It's the first thing is just laughter. As a general rule, I don't get defensive about these things because as soon as you get defensive, people can see that their jokes have hit home. It's funny. I've done a lot of media appearances over the last 5 years or so, and what keeps happening over and over is that journalists, they kind of pretend to be objective, but really they're being judged on page views, and they bring their own opinions to the table. But what happens is they'll sort of pretend to be objective, and they'll use me, they'll sensationalize me or what I do, or they'll sensationalize paleo just to grab eyeballs, because we've got a big community, we drive a lot of traffic, and so they sensationalize it. When I was on Colbert, it was really a fun interview, and this is not a statement about me. I was trying to represent the movement well, but it was one of the better articulations of sort of paleo in the mainstream media. And here's why I think it went so well. See, with these other journalists, they pretend to be objective, sensationalize me. With Colbert, he's so goofy and off the wall that he's the crazy one, and I got to be reasonable and contrast. And that actually made a big difference, because he would say all these nutty, crazy things. He would be the caveman stereotype. And then I could laugh. I could say, but actually, here's why it's a sensible point of view, and what we're doing isn't nutty. And so that framing actually made a very big difference. The other thing is that, to some extent, I don't really care what other people think. And if it works for me and it works for other people that I know and care about, then I don't really care whether other people sort of joke about the caveman stereotype stuff. At the same time, I did try to write my book to reach people who weren't interested in identifying with paleo. I sort of wrote it for intelligent skeptics, the book that even if you're already into paleo and you've read the books, you can maybe give to somebody who isn't paleo and have them come away from it and say, that was, this is more sophisticated and entertaining than I thought it was. So that those are some of the ways that I've dealt with it in my own life. Though I have to say there are just a few jokes that people think they're being creative when they say them, and I have heard them 1,000 times, and it's like, enough, right? Anytime I use a modern piece of technology, cavemen didn't use those, and it's like, look, make the caveman jokes if you want, but please just make them original,
Yeah, they try to say, okay, if you're eating like caveman, everything has to be like that. And it's like, no, that's not true.
I know. I mean, the other thing that has been sort of funny to watch, from my perch, is the media. They'll sensationalize something. So I can't tell you how many times I've done a media appearance where they ask me to do something that I don't usually do. They'll be like, shouldn't you be barefoot right now? And I'm like, not in the middle of a sidewalk in New York City. Or shouldn't you be shirtless? Or shouldn't you be wearing a loincloth? Or shouldn't you be eating a pigeon? Or, all sorts of different things. So round one is sensationalize. And then round two is they criticize their own sensationalized version of paleo. So I read these criticisms of paleo that are just all the journalists in round two are doing is criticizing the journalists in round one. And they don't actually go back to the actual source material, to my book, to Rob Wolf's book, to Mark Sisson's book. And, you know, so it's this weird, funny media echo chamber that is not always grounded in reality.
So on Paleo Gardening, our mission is to make the paleo lifestyle available to anyone by inspiring and teaching practical skills. So how would you encourage someone who is just beginning their paleo journey?
You know, I do recommend that people make a commitment for a month, for 3 or 4 weeks, something like that, where they really try to, you know, jump in with both feet. If you make incremental small changes, you're less likely to see an effect. And if you don't see an effect, it will, you know, you'll be less motivated to continue. So, you know, so the first thing I tell people is to, you know, give it a real shot. The second thing that's profoundly important is your social group and your social network. And it's really important to find someone that you know, might be at your gym, might be a family member, that is supporting you or sort of eats in a similar way, might be a coworker. You know, you might join a CrossFit box or the local gym and maybe a trainer there, because the social part is food and drink is so social. If everyone around you is eating a certain way, it's very difficult to change how you eat. And sort of the reverse of that is if everybody is eating healthy, you know, there's peer pressure to continue to eat that way and support to eat that way. So I'd pay attention to your social group and really, you know, try to find someone, even if it's online, that will support you over that you know, time. And, you know, maybe it's an online forum where you can just go and ask questions, because the social aspect is really important. You know, and I'd also try to find ways to have fun doing it. The workout plan, you should find for movement and working out. First of all, you know, people will argue all the time, what is the optimal way to work out? And is it 3 sets of 6 or 6 sets of 3? And, you know, is it curls or, you know, is it burpees? And really, for most people, the most important thing is just to move. Just go do something that you love. Go, you know, bicycling through the woods, or, you know, go ice skating with some friends, or, you know, go running with your dog or something like that. And just do something that you enjoy and stop stressing about whether it's, you know, the optimal way of working out or something like that. So those would be some of my initial tips. And of course, you know, before you start, I know people don't like to take pictures of themselves when they're not at their best. Take some good pictures of yourself in good lighting, in a consistent position. Get on the scale, put down a number. I know a number isn't everything, but when you accomplish 3 or 4 weeks of doing paleo, I want you to be able to look back at those things and realize how much you've accomplished and how far you've come, because that's important, and it's an important source of motivation going forward. And I can't tell you how many people have jumped in and gotten good results, and they have so much regret because they say, man, I wish I had a picture of myself at my worst, because I'm so much better now, and I want to appreciate and enjoy that. So do those things.
Yeah, that's a good way to do that. And in 3 or 4 weeks, you will have good results if you go into this wholeheartedly. It's amazing.
Oh, there was just a study that came out on removing sugar from kids' diets, and they just had remarkable effects after only 10 days in terms of blood work and some other measures. So some of these, and you know, I know a lot of folks who have had autoimmune or digestive issues where, they remove the nightshades, or they remove the gluten, or they remove the corn, or whatever it is that might be bothering them. And there are people that 4 days later, they're like, oh my gosh, my IBS, it's clearing up, or 10 days later, or something like that. So, really, you can really get some incredible results in a short period of time.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that in myself and in the people around me that I keep influencing. Like, oh, you got to try this, and they do, and it's amazing. So, thanks, John, for taking the time for an interview for the Paleo Garden community. For those of you listening, to learn more about John Durant, you can click on the links in the description below or by visiting hunter-gatherer.com. It was a pleasure to have you as a guest on the Paleo Gardening Expert interview. Have a wonderful day.